I'm Nick Westergaard, and this is On Brand, helping you tell your story. Most conversations about AI focus on the technology. David Dean thinks we're looking in the wrong place. In his new book, An Inbox Between Us, AI and the Reality of Modern Work, he argues that AI is acting like a mirror, revealing the hidden workarounds, decision-making, and human judgment that have always kept organizations running. Today, we're talking about what leaders can learn from that reflection. My interview with David is coming right up, but first, David Dean, welcome to On Brand.
Thanks for having me, Nick. I'm glad to be on here.
So I alluded to this earlier, but your central metaphor is that AI is a mirror, not just a tool. What do you mean by that?
Yeah, so the concept of AI as a mirror is not something new, has been around for a while. I'm just changing the lens of it. And so when I talk about AI as a mirror, talk about more as like an organizational mirror. And the one thing that I had discovered, especially when I started putting this book together a couple of years ago, is I've had the pleasure and opportunity to work with a lot of different business units, like ground level teams in my career, HR, finance, operations, but whether it's the executive team or lower level teams. But as I was kind of journeying into in the AI realm with what I do professionally, I was like, how do I explain this to people and kind of translate it, to where it makes sense around it. And I'm like, well, pull from my history, pull from my background, like, what do people value? What kind of interesting pieces of information could be provided to kind of help create understanding and insight about it. But honestly, it actually there was one situation that happened to me that really actually pushed me to write this book. And I was talking with a user, and this was very early as I started, these conversations around AI with business users. And she just broke into tears during that. And she's like, I feel like I'm going to be training my replacement. I feel like I'm interacting with this. And granted, this was a couple of years ago, but that really stuck with me. And I'm like, there's got to be a better way to like approach this, with especially with what I call the AI survivalist, which is they're not against AI. They're not necessarily for AI. They're just doing their jobs. They're just people in the workplace. AI is a tool, around it. They may or may not use it. But a lot of people they felt lost. They felt frustrated or angry or don't know, all these different types of things. So there's a lot of emotion around here. And I'm like, well, what if the greatest opportunity of AI is not tooling, where a lot of people and getting ahead? What if it's self-discovery? What if it's the opportunity of organizational self-discovery? And so I began exploring that concept when I was putting together this book and put all this kind of lived experience and lived consequence that I had in talking with different business people, because I build a lot of solutions and design a lot of solutions in the productivity area. And so I've had a lot of years asking people why you do the things that you do every day, with it. So I took a lot of what I know and I've learned, and I translated that into a book. And I said, what if we can look at the behaviors that we've never been able to answer questions about? And so that's where I was talking about this reveal of organizational self-discovery. Is the frontier of AI is looking at ourselves as an individual employee, as a team, or as an organization, and look at how we behave in order to improve us as humans and our operations and that kind of stuff. And really, I think that's the frontier of AI. And that's why I kind of AI in the organizational mirror.
So, and that's one of the things that I love about your work too, because I feel like the AI conversations are increasingly about its capabilities, about productivity, about maximizing for speed, productivity. And you spend a lot more time talking about people as you have been already. And on that speed question, I feel like right up there with, I feel like I'm training my replacement. I feel like the other question we're starting to hear a lot is, great, I can do more, but I'm already kind of working constantly as is what does the, hey, let's optimize productivity with AI look like when you're maximizing your workload? And that might be putting it politely.
Yeah, so like this is kind of my one of my most central messages around my book is conceptually, around a lot of messaging is like, hey, we're trying to like, cut costs, replace people, like a lot of the noise out there, but that's not reality. And the biggest thing around this is that what I try to help leaders understand is, why do we hire people to begin with? We hire people because of their lived experience and lived consequence. That's what's important. That's why people will matter, and people will always matter. I don't care how smart AI gets, because until AI is able to crawl out of the machine and live among humans, it will never understand that, with it. So that is a piece. The other job duties apply, in a job description. That's why we hire people to begin with. So friendly reminder to people on that. And so ultimately, what we really try to do is, um, um, could you re-ask the question again? Sorry, I got sidetracked for a second.
No worries. It was just on the, if we're constantly maximizing our productivity with tools like AI, how much is enough?
Right. And so what if the message was, hey, we appreciate everything you do as a person in our organization. And we realize we throw all kinds of uncoordinated stuff for you to figure out and deal with all the time. So what if the message is like, we're going to change the way we behave as an organization to give time back to you so that you can do what you do best as a human, is think critically, think around issues, think around corners. Let's look at our behaviors and open that up more for you to have more freedom of doing what you do best, with it. Why we hired you to begin with. And I think that's really like, people need time. Change is hard. Change takes a lot of time with it. And if people don't have the time, then they're not going to do it, or it's going to be done messy, in that regard. And that's reality. And despite how much, in fact, I just posted a newsletter article about this, like how much is getting advertised out there on how much AI is being used across organizations. It's only a small percentage. The power users are always the loudest, out there with it. Majority of people are very minimally using AI, and a lot of times inaccurately, and so they're not finding value, and they just keep doing what they're doing with it. And that's going to take time. I mean, you think about all the dot-com eras, the mobile phone, all like, it took years to people to acclimate, and there's still people who like, very minimalistically utilize the things, and that's life, relating to it. But we still value them as people. We still value the services that they provide and that type of thing, because there's something about humans that are critically important, and we can't forget about that equation. Because if you try to push it too hard, the whole idea is like, what AI does is it industrializes human behavior. Well, if you push it too hard, it's only going to cause dysfunction, and you're only going to industrialize dysfunction in your organization.
So the kind of tech disruption wave that I rode in on my career was a lot of the new digital marketing tools.
Mm-hmm.
And what you're saying makes me think of, and I'm so glad that I remember the name of it, but it's the Rogers Innovation Adoption Curve. That's where you've got your power users, as you were just
Mm-hmm.
talking about on the one end. You've got the folks that are really far behind, and no,
Mm-hmm.
I don't. And then you've got the big chunk of folks in the middle of the bell curve. And it makes me think when you were talking earlier about I think you called them the AI survivalists. I had a suspicion as you said that. I feel like that's where there's the most people. I feel like the other groups, the no AI ever, and the I'm having AI plan my breakfast to optimize my day people are the noisiest, but most, if I were to guess, are probably in that big middle group.
Yeah, I don't have any real statistics around this, but just based on my experience of doing change management and rollouts and all that kind of stuff for years that I've done, I would say about 79% of the people fall into that group, with it. And that's a large chunk, with it. 10 years from now, you may come down maybe in like another 10 or 20%, but ultimately it's not going to dramatically change, over time, maybe over many years. But we still have people that are using mobile phones like very minimally, with it, despite how many years they've been out right now, with it. So I think that's there's a lot of hype out there, and for me, I try to claim myself more as like a business AI realist. Let's be real. Let's be practical. Let's make the most sense because people are spending a lot of money and burning a lot of money, and we should really look at ourselves and that opportunity ourselves so we can truly understand what ROI means on here. Because you think about it when it comes to like AI price, AI costs are rising now, and and so everything is starting to become more consumption based, with it. And you think about it, it's like, well, I was doing this task as a person and all the time and effort to like make this happen was captured already. It was in my payroll. It's in my salary, that for me to do X, Y, and Z as a task. Well, now I'm in kind of this hybrid where part of it is my salary and part of it is the AI consumption. And especially if I don't do it right, you have the retry tax, over and over and over again. And then like that spirals out of control and all that kind of stuff. And then look, you're double paying, triple paying, in regards between payroll and AI consumption. And so what is real ROI in this aspect? And that's what I really try to do with people. It's like, you got to go back to the basics. And the hard thing is, especially like from my book, is like my book to a certain extent is more of a self-help, if you want to consider that, because everyone's looking for the what ifs, what if I can do this? What if I can do this? And the only way to really get to the what ifs is to understand the what is. And so you have to understand your behaviors as an organization to truly understand where that opportunity is, even as an individual self.
On Brand will be right back after this. Now, back to the show. One of your observations is that organizations run on workarounds. And I'm fascinated by this because so often we seek out these kind of formal systems, especially when you were talking about when it comes to things that are change management oriented and there's something new, we need a plan and it needs to be really formal because I think it makes us feel better
Mm-hmm.
that we are more prepared to meet the moment. But you really talk about the value of informal systems and workarounds.
Yeah. So this is kind of the central part. The introductory for my book is there's really two systems in an organization. You have the official documented system, which is like our job descriptions, our how we project ourselves, like our marketing and standard operating procedures, all that kind of stuff. Everything that's officially packaged, presented, and consumed at scale is what I call the documented system. Then you have what I call the undocumented system, or the unwritten contract, is really how the business actually runs. And that's what I talk about, the other duties apply. There's while you may have core systems and core technologies that facilitate things, there's people create all kinds of systems to actually get the job done. And a lot of times when leadership, when time crunches, when you have all kinds of chaos going on, good or bad, type of chaos, people naturally utilize tools that they're aware of in order to get that job done. So, like a fragment, an artifact of this is, how many spreadsheets does your company have? You know, because that is the number one artifact to prove on how much undocumented behaviors are done, because that's what we naturally go to. Everyone knows spreadsheets. Everyone generally knows what to do. So I can track things, I can organize things, I can lay things out and see things with that. It's super easy for me to kind of fall back on that. And so people build all kinds of informal systems in order to survive what is expected of them with it. They may not have an official system and they get the job done, but a lot of times a lot of business processes are relying on humans. I have to go talk to Joe, and Joe has to go talk to Steve, and Steve has Susie does something, and then she comes back, and then it comes back, and then I can move on to the next major step. That's reality out there. And this is what I talk about, is that reality is a huge opportunity to understand how your business is actually run, how things get done. And it's kind of one of the central cores of discovery around AI, because the one thing that not really talked about a lot, people are sort of doing that, but like holistically, that's part of the reason it came out, is the value of the behavioral record. And so when you start, with AI pointing at your emails, your chat messages, your meeting transcripts, that has an opportunity to understand the behavioral record of how your organization really works in that unwritten contract, because that's how decisions are made. That's where challenges and issues and amazing opportunities have come about. That's where it's documented to a portion of it. So, because the other portion's up here, it's in us. So you have to put both of them together to really get the true story. But you can get signals of how you organizationally behave, and that is the opportunity and frontier for organizations to start discovering.
So you write that many organizations think they have a technology problem, and I love this. When they actually have a behavioral problem. I wonder if you could give us an example of what this looks like.
Yeah, so one of the most simplest examples, like every organization has some kind of approval process. Doesn't matter what it is. And usually that's one of the biggest complaints. Like, it takes forever, something to get approved, and all this kind of stuff relating to it. And like, why is it taking so long to get it approved? Well, if you start looking at the behavioral record, most approvals are done via email. Despite however many official systems, like, people are still like, I'm going to email something, I'm waiting for someone to, approve so I can move on to my next step. And when you start looking at that behavioral record, why is it taking so long for that to approve? And you start looking at certain behaviors and certain aspects surrounding maybe that individual with it. And what you may discover is that person is, you look at their calendar from a behavioral record standpoint, they're overloaded. They have meetings like, 40 hours a week, and there's no way that they would have any time to actually look at something. What you may see is that they've emailed something off to other people. They're trying to gain the confidence to feel like that they can make a decision on something, so they don't feel like they have the authority to make that decision. So they're going to round people up. So that's what I'm talking about, is that there are things that can be solved without technology by using AI to understand how you behave as an organization, because it may just be a conversation. That's it. You don't need to buy a tool. You don't need to build anything. You just need to say, hey, we totally, this situation, we totally trust you. Or, hey, we need to delegate this to someone else because they're just too busy. Or maybe we need to look at why they're so busy, with stuff with it. That is where I'm talking about, is where there's challenges and dysfunction in an organization. All organizations have dysfunction, and micro and macro with it. But ideally, let's slow down
Yeah.
to look at this stuff in order to speed up and try to address the problems that we need to address.
So one idea that I found fascinating as you talk about when to use it, when not to, you note that AI doesn't understand confidence, risk, or consequences, and humans do. Why is that distinction becoming even more important, and how do we continue to develop the necessary critical thinking and decision making skills and judgment to not lose sight of those important human parts of the equation?
Yeah, it's easy to fall, into like just believing in everything that AI is saying, and because it provides so much opportunity and signals, but that's really what it is. It's signals. That's what it, because it's still, you have to measure those signals into your lived experience and lived consequence with this. And so I use this example, and it's a more consequential example, but I think it best represents on why lived experience and lived consequences is so critically important. So several months ago, we had the unfortunate situation of LaGuardia, where that airline pilot, had hit that firefighting or truck, or like medical truck that was on the runway, and it was stated at the time that he had a 6-second decision to either swerve or hit it dead on, with it. And in those 6 seconds, that pilot thought about everything, all of his training, everything that he did, all the downstream consequences of that decision, that he was likely going to die, his pilot was going to die, all of his families were going to be affected by that change, children, grandchildren, all that kind of stuff, in that 6 seconds, versus all the people behind the airplane, and all that effect. And he made a choice. He made a decision, and that's the decision he made, and he saved lives in that circumstance with it, sacrificing himself and as well as the pilot. Now, that is why humans matter, because no matter how much AI, they're going to put calculations on human life, and all these kinds of things, and try to do all these math and variables, but there's something about human instinct and human intuition in those circumstances based on how we feel about something. We know what's right, we know what's wrong in that regard. That is something that we will always value amongst as humans and as each other with it. And that is critical in some of these decisions, because what if things don't go right? Who's going to take care of it? AI is not going to always be able to take care of it. They're not going to figure it out, and it'll eventually give up, with it. And so, and when it comes to business, you can't give up. Like, it needs to be fixed now. It needs to be addressed right now. So who's going to do that? If you've replaced all the humans and you use AI, and there's no one to step in and say, oh, here we go, this is what we fixed. That human intuition matters. And that's why you have to be critical, but understand that relationship. And that's what I talk about in the book, because it is a relationship. All relationships take a long time to put together and manifest, but it's a relationship between the employer and AI and the employee. And it's kind of a triangle to understand how that relationship dynamic is going to work.
So I love that in this interview about AI, we've talked a lot about humans, and that story is a great example of that. Looking ahead 5 years, what leadership skill becomes dramatically more valuable because of AI, not less?
Um, the one thing I think is going to be more critically important as a leader is authenticity. And the reason I say authenticity is because essentially in this day and age, AI can almost literally discover anything at this point. And that means all of your behaviors as well as a leader. So it's going to drive people to be more real, more authentic, um, more realistic to a certain degree on it. Because if you're one of those individuals that says one thing and does another, you can't hide from it anymore. All your behavior is potentially discoverable now by anybody, especially in that behavioral record. So you have to be people will respect people that are the same person no matter what. Even if I don't principally agree with you, I know where you're going to come from. I know where you're going to go. And I will still trust you on what you are going to do and how to handle that. So if you're going to stand by your principles, then always stand by your principles with it. And driving authenticity is going to be more and more either important, or people are just going to have to do it because they'll need to.
Well, David, we've talked about a lot of big ideas, and we can lighten things up a bit because I'm going to ask you for a brand that has made you smile recently.
I would say, well, I will have to say right now, in the most immediate standpoint, just from the timing of this, is Marvel. And the only reason I say Marvel is because I just had the opportunity to go and see the new Spider-Man movie with my son with it. And it was a great movie. It was very enjoyable and allowed me to experience something with my son that we're both going to enjoy and create a happy memory. And really, like, isn't that the things that we always really kind of want as people, is to be able to create as many happy memories as we can. Doesn't matter what brand it is. If it allows it to happen, then so be it.
Well, that makes me smile because I too went with my son yesterday and had a great time. So I echo all of that. David, where can we send folks to learn more about who you are and what you do?
DavidChristopherDean.com is my website. My book, Inbox Between Us, is .com is also where you can get to the book. My book is available on all major retailers, and it just recently came out with an audiobook version, and it has been a hit since then. So I have a lot of interest. A lot of people have been asking about it. So go check it out. It's on Audible and will be coming out on other platforms soon.
Awesome. Well, we will link up to all of that in our show notes, which folks can find at onbrandpodcast.com. David Dean, thanks for being on brand with us.
Thanks for having me.
On Brand is part of the Marketing Podcast Network. If you like what you're hearing, if we've made you smile, you can always listen free on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or whatever your favorite platform may be. And please take a moment and rate and review the podcast to help others find the show. Until next week, I'm Nick Westergaard, and I'll see you on the internet.